Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 13th annual Behind the Music panel. I'm Jana Davidoff, CEO of Rhapsody PR, and this is Alex Beck. We love working with Comic-Con every year, and we are so thrilled that we can still bring you our panel virtually. Here's hoping that next year we'll all be together in person again. Before our panel begins, I'd like to take a moment to thank Eddie, Laura, Adam, and the entire Comic-Con team for finding a way to bring these panels to you wonderful fans during these crazy times. Now, on to our panel. Panelists, feel free to wave to the camera when you hear your name. First, the Emmy-nominated composer of This Is Us and the upcoming Only Murders in the Building, which I'm so excited for, please welcome Siddhartha Khosla. Woo! Cheering is welcome. Next, the composer of Monsters at Work and Peter Rabbit 2: The Runaway, please welcome Dominic Lewis. Next, the Emmy-nominated score mixer of Ozark and Cobra Kai, please welcome Phil McGowan.
Yeah.
Hi. Next, the Emmy-nominated composer of Victoria and Marvel's Loki, please welcome Natalie Holt. Next, the music supervisor of Fargo, The Great, and Shrill, please welcome Maggie Phillips.
Hi.
I'm getting so sick of my own cheer, but you guys deserve so much more. I can't wait for an audience to be cheering you all on. Next, the Emmy-winning and Grammy-nominated composer of Fargo, Star Trek Discovery, and Star Trek Picard, which happens to star an actress who our moderator might know something about. Please welcome Jeff Russo. And last but certainly not least, we have the Emmy-winning composer of Ratched, American Horror Story, and The Vow. Please welcome Mac Quayle. Now on to our moderator. You'll recognize him as Professor Hanover from Ratched. Please welcome Jon Jon Briones.
Hey!
Take it away.
How's everyone? I am beyond thrilled to be here today with all these amazing music creatives who've come together to discuss the music of some of our favorite series and films. So let's get started. No favoritism here. So let's start with Mac Quayle. Mac, what was your approach to scoring a drama series like Ratched as opposed to a documentary series like The Vow?
Well, you know, the approach I find for any project, it's almost the same approach. It's creating music that helps the filmmaker tell their story, and so the nuts and bolts of it tend to be the same. The type of music, the genre, of course, will be different. Ratched was a retro orchestral score that is in the style of Bernard Herrmann and Elmer Bernstein. The Vow is a more sort of electronic, modern score with a lot of different types of flavors in it. But at the heart, they're both just a tool for the filmmaker to tell their story.
Loved it, by the way. And now, okay, let's go to Natalie Holt. Natalie, hi.
Hi.
You score Marvel's Loki. How does it feel to be part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Were you a Marvel fan before working on the show?
Yes, I was, and you know, my favorite characters were definitely like probably in Thor and Guardians of the Galaxy, and Loki was one of my favorite characters, like my favorite baddie. So I was so blown away to land the show, and yeah, it was just a dream to work on. I loved it. Should I expand on that?
I was about to say something and I didn't. So I didn't say it. Okay. Siddhartha Khosla. Sid, how is working on an intimate and evocative score like This Is Us different from your highly anticipated upcoming score on Only Murders in the Building?
You know, kind of like what Mac was saying, there's there's a lot of sort of commonality across the board. For me, it's always writing in themes. So for me, I hear inherently, like from instantly from reading a script or from seeing a little bit of picture, I hear a theme, I hear melody right away. And so for me, that doesn't change project to project. So the difference between the two scores is on This Is Us, I'm basically making all of it here in this studio, from making the sound of percussion on my wooden table, and miking it and stacking it 8 to 10 times or whatever, to doing everything here at home. But on Only Murders in the Building, I had the kind of like my first sort of like first time I'm actually getting to use like a full orchestra on a piece of score that I've done. And so that was very, very different. Like I played like none of the instruments on Only Murders in the Building. I played piano maybe. So the difference was the scope and the size of the instrumentation is much, much bigger on Only Murders. But at the core of it, it's very thematic and thematically driven.
Must be nice sometimes not to leave your place. Jeff Russo. Jeff, how did you approach scoring both Star Trek Picard and Star Trek Discovery? Does that approach differ in any way?
Well, much like what Mac was saying, the approach is the same. We're just trying to sort of tell an emotional story and playing thematic material and themes and music to support whatever the narrative is. They are two very scores, even though there's a lot of the same DNA. Picard is this story about a character that has been around for a long time. So I was able to utilize lots of thematic material from The Next Generation and from the original series to sort of help tell that story. With Star Trek Discovery, especially in season 3, where we have gone 1,000 years into the future, we're sort of trying to create, definitely a new identity, musical identity, while still keeping in line with what the sound of Star Trek is. So they do share a lot of DNA, but they have very different storytelling technique. And in that, I was able to sort of do one as a much bigger, broader score, and Picard is a much more focused and smaller piece, because it's really about a one person's journey versus a whole crew of people's journey.
I love that song that you composed for that for Picard, by the way, which this girl sang. Anyway.
Yeah. If only I actually composed it. I didn't. It's an Irving Berlin song.
I mean, that's.
But
I mean, you arranged beautifully.
Yes.
Sorry.
So we did an arrangement. We did an arrangement for Issa to sing, and she's so spectacular. We did that for the season 1 finale, and it was something that we had been talking about for a while. I don't know if you know the story. And at the beginning of the season, Alex Kurtzman had said, "Hey, we're going to use this song to sort of bookend. We should think about doing our own arrangement at the end and, figure out who we're going to get sing it." And then it wasn't until the middle of the season where Alex was like, Issa's a singer. She should sing it. And I was like, I didn't know. So I got onto Google and, to search it all up and hear her sing on YouTube. And I was like, holy, wow, this is going to be great. So we did that. And she sang in front of this 70-piece orchestra. And it was just so much fun. And she's a star.
We like her.
Yeah.
Maggie Phillips. Maggie, hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. The Great takes place in Russia during the 18th century, while season 4 of Fargo takes place in the 1950s. How does the time period influence your choices when it comes to picking out the music for both these shows?
Yeah, I'll answer that super quickly. I just want to say, because while I've been listening to everyone, how nice it is to see Mac, to see Sid, to see Jeff, people who I've worked with in the past, and I never get a chance to even hear how they work. And I just think how we should all be very grateful that we get this time. And nice to meet Dominic and Phil and Natalie, who I've never met in person. But anyway, I've been fans of all of your work. So hi. It's not very different. And nice to meet you, Jon Jon. Sorry, we should all, I love it. But it's not very different than what these guys are talking. It's just like, I have a process that's similar for every show. I take each show and I do my research, and I do research on the time periods in the Fargo that was in the 50s, and research of the great that took place in Russia in 18th century. And I start with like where they all came from, and then I do character driven playlists with those time periods in mind. But the grade, if anyone has watched it, I don't know, we don't stick close to the period for the end songs. Those songs come from all over, like Everybody Wants to Rule the World. That was the end of the first episode in the first season. It was Patti Smith covering the Tears for Fears that came out in 2007. It wasn't the 18th century. We are allowed freedom because that show is sort of tongue-in-cheek, and we can do whatever we want. Fargo, we tried to stay much more strict to the period because it's in the 50s, but the 50s is sort of limited when we were in the early 50s, and that's sort of limited when it comes to jazz coming out of the time of Kansas. Is that Jeff? Kansas.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes,
okay.
that's right.
It was a year ago. Okay. And so we tried to keep it as period specific as possible, but we cheated it a little bit to get the right songs. Like we got Caravan in there from 1937, and we got Moaning from Art Blakey that came out in 1959, and then we even put in a Johnny Cash song that came out in 1970s. It's more about like trying to get the period right, but then also trying to get the emotion right. And then it's a lot of balancing act all in the, with every show, it's a balancing act of all of that. And every showrunner and every director and every composer has a different idea. And then I just try to make it all happen. So
of course, your library must be huge.
I cannot keep it straight. I will admit to that. People think I know everything about every song that's ever been made, but I probably have at some point, but I have to check my notes and go back to my library to answer them.
Let's move to Phil McGowan. Phil, hi.
Hi.
How did you first become interested in the engineering and technology side of music? And how did you get started working as a score mixer?
I've been around music since I was a kid. Both my parents were sort of amateur, semi-professional musicians. They played keyboard and piano. So I started taking piano lessons when I was in second grade. And then my dad always had keyboards around the house. He had an old Korg M1, an old Kurzweil, and some stuff like that. So I remember as a kid messing around with the little mixer he had and his speakers, and kind of started to get interested in sort of recording technology and live sound things as well. I grew up in central Maine, so as far away from LA as you can get without leaving the country. So I did whatever I could locally with little small gigs and stuff like that, helping out sound people and whatnot. And then I think it was in high school when I first got Pro Tools and started to play around with recording things. And at the same time, I had interest of being a composer at one point as well, but I was really interested and loved mixing and recording and live sound and all that. And then I went to college at Berkeley in Boston and was going to do a dual major, wanted to do it all, musician, composer, mixer, everything, and kind of realized really what I was best at was mixing and recording and all the audio technology stuff. I finished Berkeley in 2009, and then in 2010 I moved out here specifically to be a score mixer because I had always been a huge fan of film sound and film music. And then it was just seemed like the perfect combination of all of my love for recording technology and then my love for film, television, and video game music. So sort of, yeah, just assisted a few different people when I first got to town. I was basically like a freelance assistant. And then I worked for another composer, Trevor Morris, for about 4.5 years. And then in 2015, I went freelance, and I've been there ever since. So, you know, all my clients are composers, and they just hire me project by project. I'm not usually hired by studios or anything like that, so I'm very much kind of in the scoring world.
That's quite a journey there.
Yeah.
I love the story of how your parents didn't give you a chance. Just basically, that's what you're gonna be. It's like our family.
Yeah, I'm sure they would love to see me on stage or, you know, doing something more overt with music, but I'm more of a behind the scenes guy now, so that worked out well for me.
Dominic Lewis, Dom, how are you?
Good. How are you, mate?
Good. You've scored quite a lot of animated features and series over the years. Both the feature film Peter Rabbit 2, The Runaway, and the series Monsters at Work come out this month. How would you say your approach to composing music for animation differs from some of the other work you've done?
I think for me, animation, I tend to kind of, like Sid, think of melodies first. And I tend to just kind of start at the piano and think more in terms of melody, as Sid was saying. But for the more kind of electronic scores I've done, I like to kind of just get a bunch of audio together and manipulate sounds and see if there any melodies are coming out of that, any tunes are coming out of that stuff. For example, when I did Money Monster, I got a bunch of stock market noises and threw them all in the sequencer and just started messing around with them. And like little things for out of delays and things, little kind of motifs would come out of that. But with Monsters, it's following Randy is hard enough. So I kind of we really knuckled down on finding themes first. And it was like 3 months with Bob's, the showrunner, of nailing down themes. And he was like, I really want good earworms, catchy themes. So it was, and you know, the great thing about doing a sequel is that, you know, a lot of the themes for the Rabbit movie were already done. So I just kind of was adding new bad guys and little bits of new character motifs. But so that was cool to do a sequel because it was a different process because there was, you know, an existing thing already. So but yeah, it does differ from animation to live action, I think.
Jeff, Maggie, and Mac, all three of you have something in common, that you all have recurrent collaborations with certain showrunners. Jeff and Maggie have both worked with Noah Hawley on shows like Fargo and Legion. Mac, you've worked on numerous Ryan Murphy shows such as American Horror Story, Ratched, The Politician, and more. Tell us about your working relation with Hawley Murphy and his team over the years, and what does it take to collaborate with a showrunner in terms of the musical vision of a project?
I mean, also I can start. I think it's different for everybody's relationship with their collaborators on that level is different. You know, my relationship with Noah has spanned about 12 years now, and we've worked on a number of projects together and become very dear, close friends. And we start talking about projects that he's beginning very early on. I'm here in Austin actually talking to him about a project that he's starting that won't start for like another year and a half or something. So we get into it really early, so I can start writing music that we're talking about to help him understand how music is going to relate to his storytelling. And he likes to have that really early on. And that was something that we started you know, at the beginning of Fargo, when we first did the first season of Fargo, and it has extended into all 4 seasons of Fargo, all 3 seasons of Legion, and what we're going into now in his film that we did, Lucy in the Sky. So it's a question of getting in very early and collaborating on the musical sound of whatever his upcoming projects are as early as we can. That makes the process while we're in production go much faster, much easier. It's one less thing that he's thinking about when he's in the editorial process, because music is, you know, halfway done or 3/4 of the way already done.
Maggie?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'm in Austin too, but not for the same reason that Jeff's in Austin. So hi, Jeff. I knew you were coming. Hi. I don't get in as early as Jeff does. Jeff and Noah start a little bit earlier and start talking themes and music. I get in maybe a couple months early after that, when Noah, it starts earlier on the script page, and I get in maybe 3 months later in the script phase, and Noah and I start talking about themes, characters, period. Like the show he's talking about now, period will take place, but I don't know how it's going to take place. We're not allowed to mention, I guess. But
notice how I didn't say anything about it.
I know I didn't prep for that. But I would guess in 3 months, I'll get a text from Noah at like 5 a.m, and he'll be ready to talk about period and characters and themes. And then I just hop on it, and then we take it from there. And luckily we have a shorthand at this point, and it's great. It's like a family. It's a family. It's dysfunctional. It's very functional. There's many different things, but we all figure it out together, and we all love each other. And I don't know. I'm so grateful for it. And then also I'll put this to Mac, because Mac and I work on also Sam Esmail shows together. We work together on Mr. Robot. And so I have, a relationship with Sam Esmail that I love working with him. And so I'll throw this to Mac. You take it.
Got it. So yeah, I mean, my process with Ryan is a bit different than what was just described. And Ryan, he's like sort of ridiculously prolific, and is so busy with so many projects happening at once that he's creating or directing or writing and so we don't have a lot of direct contact. I'm more in contact with his team, but he'll just be essentially the big picture about music. Like Ratched, for instance, it's like, okay, this story takes place in 1947. I want a period retro orchestral score in the style of Bernard Herrmann. Like that'll be his, that's the beginning. And then from there, I'll start writing themes and creating things that will now end up in the cut, and then go to Ryan. And then I'll get the note from him will be, again, something just very simple and big picture. This is great. We need overall, it needs to be more horror. We need some more horror sounds. And and then I'll go back and do my thing. And like I said, mostly I'm in the trenches with editorial and other producers, and that's kind of how we've worked for almost 7 years now on so many projects, and they all start in a similar way, a little ahead of when they're actually starting. So I do get some advance time to think about it, read some scripts. Sometimes write some music beforehand, sometimes not. It depends. I do really like that, as Jeff said, to write music ahead of time and have that music already being used in the edit bay as they're putting it together is a really great thing if you can do that. And so when I've had that opportunity, it makes the process go. It's so much smoother when you're working that way.
Thank you, Maggie, for segueing that.
You're welcome.
Natalie, how different is it to create a score for a series in the superhero genre like Loki versus a period drama like Victoria? Sorry.
So I found it quite it was a good training ground for coming up with the concept of like a kind of big Shakespearean character and like regal kind of grand music. Like I kind of thought that the theme for Loki needed to be kind of epic and big and have lots of pomp and majesty to it. So yeah, in a way that was kind of a handy show to have scored, because I think, you know, like the choral kind of elements and, you know, the kind of historical references, like I was listening to lots of Wagner, and yeah, that all kind of fed into the theme that I ended up coming up with for Loki. So yeah, I think the two things complemented each other. So I've got a visitor in the background.
Oh, hello there.
It's like 8:30 in the UK, and it should have happened earlier than this, but sorry.
No problem. Sid, looking back at the seasons that came before, how has the music of This Is Us evolved over the years, and how do you keep it feeling new from one season to the next?
I think it kind of ties into the larger idea of the show. You know, the show is about this larger connectivity in life. It's this idea that your great grandmother could have made a seemingly small or benign choice that ended up affecting your mother, and then affected you, and then that in turn affects everyone that follows you. And because the show is sort of like expanded its sort of reach, and there are all of these, like the drama is like it's become this sort of sprawling idea of all these people that are connected in ways that you never thought they could have been connected. I think that sort of made me sort of expand the palette a lot more over the seasons. I know, like in season 1, in like the pilot episode, I can't even listen to my score from the first episode because I think it's awful. And it's just like it's me trying to figure it out on like an acoustic guitar and like and a piano, and just very, very simple. Like it was very raw. And to some people it had a charm. I know that the producers were very happy with it, but I think over time it's now expanded. I've become way more experimental with the sound. There's a lot of sort of like, I would say Brian Eno plays a huge sort of influence on my approach to the score, just in terms of making sort of very atmospheric sounds out of very organic things. Like all the pads and all the sort of like textures you hear. I don't use any MIDI on this show at all. It's basically every single pad sound is created from either my piano that's being run through, you know, Roland Space Echoes and, you know, vintage sort of like gear like that, to like, you know, multiple reverbs where like I'll play a chord and that will become like I'll put a 30-second sort of decay on the reverb, and that's the pad, you know. Or I use my harmonium, which is, I don't know if you can see it right there. I use that and I run that through like walls of reverb. And so the sound is expanded a lot. I think a lot of that's come from me sort of finding that there was also sort of like an Indian sort of inspiration that I brought to the score from my own childhood. When I started seeing this larger connectivity of life in the story, it made me think of my own family, and I brought some of that melodic sensibility into the score. And I think there's a lot of liberty on that show. Dan Fogelman, going back to what you guys are talking about, you know, in terms of relationships with showrunners, I've known Dan Fogelman more. I've known him longer than I haven't, so I've known him since I was 17, and so there's a inherent sort of like trust that comes with the work too, where he's like, I remember that thing that you did freshman year of college when you remember that you were like messing around with that. He'll bring up things like that and things that I will have forgotten, to remind me that at the end of the day, we're all artists trying to make something creative, and we're not trying to fit into any sort of mold. We want to kind of do our own thing sometimes. So because of that support from Dan, and just sort of the larger picture story, the sound is expanded. Sorry, very long-winded answer.
No, that was beautiful. Phil, what are some of the challenges you've run into while mixing the score for Cobra Kai over the years?
I mean, first of all, that show is just really, really fun because it's part of what makes it fun and also a little bit challenging is the genre of the score runs the gamut. We've got like 80s hair metal all the way up to just more traditional orchestral underscore pieces that need to be all mixed together. So there's all those different genres, balancing those and getting them all to sort of conform to sort of a somewhat consistent level and sound so that it all works in the dub really well. Is definitely a challenge, but overall really fun. And then also we just have a ton of different sources coming together. Not more than you would have, I guess, on a typical film production, but we record orchestra in Prague. And then we have some musicians here in town that are all playing on drums and guitars and things like that. And then Zach and Leo also, give me all of the stems from their sequencer to combine. So the beginning of every Cobra Kai episode is really just wrangling all the assets and kind of getting everything organized by cue so that I have everything that I need. And then try to prioritize, what's the biggest cue. I mean, the last episode of the last season, there's this like 10.5-minute fight sequences going back to like flashbacks to Vietnam, and it's going to the kids fighting, and then two of the main characters are also fighting at the same time. So it's just back and forth, and the styles are jumping all over the place. So it's just trying to get that to sound consistent while it's just, juggling genres all the time. So yeah, those episodes sometimes can take a long time just to sort of get put together and then start to do my thing after that.
Dominic, how did you go about composing the main title theme for Monsters at Work?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't have to compose it because Randy had already done that for me. But I wanted to try and do something slightly different. So we went through a bunch of things. I did a big band version of it. I did kind of like a rock version of it. And actually all of these versions, Bob's had this idea to put them as the end credits. So depending on what was going on in the episode, it would come back at the end of the episode as like, so we have like an ice cream truck version of it, an 80s rock version of it. But the one that everyone fell in love with is just, it was late one night and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to try and do an a cappella version. And I don't know if you know the main title of Monsters Inc., but it's like it's very jazz and it's pretty intricate. So it was really hard, but luckily I have computers to help me time and tune things in the jazz genre. But yeah, the execs fell in love with it, and it's so they started out being like a 30-second version of Randy's theme, and then I stupidly said I'd do the whole thing with all the solos and everything, which took forever, but it was great. It was a really good experience for me to kind of, because I haven't really since college, really, I haven't really dug into the jazz world. I mean, obviously I listen in my spare time and stuff, but I had to really kind of get my chops back and go and, study some standards and stuff. So it was a really cool experience to take the amazing piece that Randy did for the movie and try and kind of put a different spin on it.
Jeff, the film Oslo features quite a few heartbreaking moments. How did you and co-composer Zoe Keating approach scoring those moments in the film?
Wow. It's a really timely movie, right? It's talking about an ongoing battle. I say battle, like an ongoing conflict that has been going on it's been going on for a really, really long time, and it's heartbreaking. The whole thing is heartbreaking. you know, one of the things we did early on before we started scoring the picture was we got on Zoom and we started to, you know, work on what we thought was thematic. You know, we wanted to write an Oslo theme, a theme for these characters, a theme for the whole idea of the movie. And from that, we wrote like a 5-minute suite, 6-minute suite of music that I think encapsulated most of what we were trying to get across. And that motif comes back a number of times in the movie. But it was really about us talking about how to really say the thing that isn't getting said on screen, how to communicate that, and you know, it had to be deep and penetrating. That's what we kept saying. You know, it has to penetrate. It really has to make you feel what everybody in this film must be feeling. Because a lot of times, you know, in these types of situations, no one is talking about how they're feeling. They're only talking about what each side wants and what each side needs in order to achieve peace. But nobody talks about how each side is actually feeling in the whole thing. And that was really important to get across in the music of the film. And so we talked a lot about that, and through melodic and sort of structural and motivic ideas back and forth to each other until we sort of we came together with a number of different ideas, and then we just sort of sketched those out. And that's how we really came to understand what the musicality of the movie was going to be.
Phil, what technologies and equipment do you use in the mixing suite, and what are some of the tools or technology that you couldn't do your job without?
Well, like most mixers and engineers, I'm all in Pro Tools. That's my DAW of choice. For mixing, it's all in the box as it was now, as the term goes. I do have a couple of outboard reverbs, but apart from that, everything is all plugins and processing in Pro Tools. When we record, it's really nice to have a big fancy analog console for doing headphone mixes and things like that, but mixing is all pretty much in the box for film and TV and video game scores that I work on. A lot of my job too is also, most composers work in stereo. So a lot of times, pretty much for everything now, I'm mixing in 5.1, or I just finished upgrading my room to Dolby Atmos. So even, you know, Netflix supports Atmos now. All broadcast TV is at least 5.1. So a lot of my job too is taking the score and mixing it into one of these bigger surround sound formats in an appropriate way that's not too distracting, but just sort of, you know, helps enhance the immersion of the score, because really that's, you know, score, usually the function is to support the story and not always be noticed, but sometimes it's nice to just get a really immersive mix going so that it just sort of, you know, hugs the listener in a way, depending on what the emotion is needed. So Pro Tools is definitely, I've thought about just contextually trying to think like, oh, could I actually do a big, you know, surround sound movie score mix or something in another DAW, and it's probably possible, but Pro Tools really is kind of tailor fit for engineers and mixers. I think everyone here probably is on something else, though I have some clients, Danny and Sandra, who do Ozark, are in Pro Tools, but most composers seem to be on Cubase or Logic or something else. But yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest tool in my palette is just Pro Tools.
Has anyone ever told you, Phil, that you have the perfect podcast voice? I mean, it may be the SM7, but I think it's you. I'm gonna give you credit.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I've heard it. Yeah, I heard maybe I could have a good voice for radio, but yeah, I suppose that
totally
translates to podcast.
Without question. I'm loving it.
Maybe I need to tap into a narration or overdub career.
You're talking about score hugging the listener. Your voice is hugging me. I'm loving it. Okay.
Beautiful. Maggie, what are some of the projects you have coming up that you're most excited about?
That's a really good question. It's a hard question. First, quickly, Phil, I have another question for you. Where did you grow up in Central Maine? Because I spent my summers going there when I was a little kid with my.
Oh, I grew up in Waterville, which is right next to the Belgrade Lakes area.
Belgrade Lakes is where I used to go because my mom is a school teacher, and that's where she used to go when she was a kid. I know Belgrade Lakes so well.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I went to Meslonsky High School, which is the Belgrade Lakes area high school.
Okay. Well,
Phil and Maggie should do a podcast on Maine, and I'll listen in.
I'm always amazed when I meet
listen
anyone.
in. I will definitely listen in.
I know almost no one knows. So literally, Belgrade Lakes is a 2-street town. Basically, there's Skunk Alley and Main Street. It's not called Skunk Alley anymore.
That's the name of the podcast, Skunk Alley. Phil and Maggie.
I love it.
Everyone knows my hometown from Wet Hot American Summer. They go to Waterville to do drugs in the middle of that movie. So that's where I tell people I'm from.
Yeah, I would love to talk to you about that because no one else knows that. Okay. Good question, because I have a lot I'm really excited about, which is awesome. And one of the reasons I'm a little scattered right now. But I am excited about a new show I'm doing with Sam Esmail called Gaslit, which is starring Julia Roberts, Sean Penn, Dan Stevens from Legion. That's all I can remember right now. And it's about the Watergate scandal, but a comedic take that is about Martha Mitchell and John Mitchell. I think that's about all I can say. But Julia Roberts is playing Martha Mitchell. It's going to be so funny. The scripts are great.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's going to be so cool. So it'll come out on that's NBC Universal, and I don't know what network. It might be Stars or Epic. I don't know, but it'll come out soon and well, next year. Anyway, that's one I'm excited about. I'm also excited about a show called Our Flag Means Death, which is Taika Waititi and David Jenkins, who I worked with on People of Earth. And that's starring Taika. He's directing it. I just met him for the first time right before this call. He's a character. He was awesome. And that is coming out on HBO Max. And there's going to be like sea shanties, and I don't know how much I'm ever allowed to say. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And then the other one, I'm working with Elizabeth Moss, who I work with on Handmaid's Tale. She brought me on to do a show called Shining Girls, which I do know is Apple. And it's a thriller starring Elizabeth Moss. And I'm getting my cast. No, I was going to say Bill Irwin from Fargo, but that's the Dropout that I'm excited about too. I have a lot on my plate. I'm figuring it all out, and I'm excited about all of them, and I don't want to miss anyone. But yes.
Yay for being busy. Natalie, how did you approach creating musical themes for the characters we meet in the first episode of Loki?
That's a good question. So, I don't know, I kind of had quite a lot of time because of COVID. They kind of filmed the first block and then things got shut down. So we had quite a lot of time on episodes 1 to 3. So I kind of, and then they went back into filming. So I think I probably had longer on the show than I would have done usually. And yeah, I had kind of a month to write a suite, which I've not done that much before, but I just did like a kind of theme suite, which was like, ended up being about 10 minutes long. And it just kind of had the Loki theme and the Mobius theme and other themes, which I'm not allowed to mention yet. And I just kind of get ideas when I'm usually, because I'm like a single mom, I have a small child, and you know, it's all such a juggling act. It's such a shame I didn't like have a career when I was in my 20s doing nothing and I had endless amounts of time to write. But it all just feels like, you know, you have to kind of cram all the time. And I've got a dictaphone on my phone, so I'll often be driving somewhere and I'll come up with a theme when I'm in a car or on a bike ride or something, or going for a run, and then I'll just record a theme into my phone. So like I've got these terrible versions of most of the themes that just kind of popped into my head and I recorded on my phone. But then I kind of had this idea of, using a theremin and all these kind of Norwegian folk instruments. So I kind of brought all these musicians on board as well, and then I was recording with an orchestra. So the sound just kind of grew and developed, and yeah, it kind of, I don't know, went in a bit of a unusual direction, I suppose, from things I've ever done before. But you just have to kind of fly with what you feel works for the characters, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Mac, Pose just had its final season this year. Looking back, what has been the most memorable scene for you to score?
Oh, that's never a good question.
No.
There's so many. I mean, there's so many great scenes, and I mean that show. The music. One of the main roles of the music in that show was just trying to make people cry. I mean, there's so many heart-wrenching scenes, especially in this final season. And I mean, I was like watching the mix of one of the penultimate episode a few weeks ago, and I hadn't seen it in a minute, and I'm just sitting here like bawling my eyes out, and so yeah, that was, it was either that pulling at the heartstrings, or I did get to dabble in sort of like a retro dance feel, because the timeline of the show, I think it started in '87 and ends up in the '90s, and so I got to kind of dabble in that sound from a dance perspective, doing something that would be, it almost sounds like it was source music, but it was score as well, and so it was a lot of fun doing that type of thing. But yeah, a particular scene, it's kind of hard to zero in, but yeah, I'm sad to see that show go. It was a really satisfying three seasons.
Yeah. Sid, This Is Us resonates with diverse audiences across the country, in part because the story is so universal. I think you dabbled on this a little bit in one of the questions. How have you brought your own self spiritually and culturally into the show through your score?
Well, yeah, I mean, I hinted at it before, and I think when I started realizing that the show was about that larger connectivity of life, it brought me back to like my childhood. I know everyone's heard me say this multiple times, but I, my parents came here from India in the late '70s. And then I was born here, and they had to send me back to India to be raised by my grandparents until my parents could afford to kind of bring me back. They were in school and full-time in school and full-time jobs, and they had no way to sort of like pay for babysitters to take care of me. So they saved up enough money to send me back home to India. So my early sort of like musical education was listening to like old Hindi songs that my grandparents listened to, or my mom would sing to me on a little cassette tape from America and send it to me in India, singing old like "Hey mere pyare watan," da da da, like all these like old Hindi songs, and those melodies just like got stuck in my head, and if you listen to some of those old Hindi songs, there's like no harmony. It's just all melody. All you hear is that vocal melody, and everything else is just like this tiny, and it's just like Phil would hear the mix and be like, this is one of the worst mixes I've ever heard. But it's so much about that melody and the emotion in that singing. And so I grew up as a singer. It's like what I did. And so now on this show, because I'm able to use my voice on the show, I can bring in some of that into the music. And because nobody at NBC ever came to me and said, the score is sounding too Indian, please stop, I just kept on going. And I remember asking Dan Fogelman multiple times, is this getting too Indian? This is like a big broadcast drama. Like, what are we doing? He's like, nope, keep on doing it. It's making the show unique, and it's giving it a unique sort of voice, and it's an interesting way to play the emotionality of the show. So it's this show, what I do on that show is very much me. Unlike anything else I do. I mean, this one feels more like me. So I'm going to be very sad when it's over next year. But yeah, that's how I brought in my own sort of culture into it.
Love it. Dom, while crafting your music for any scene, how do you decide what moments are silent and what needs music?
Oh, wow. What a question. I'm not sure really. I'm a big fan of where there doesn't have to be music, there shouldn't be. I think a lot of stuff is wallpapered, if you will, these days, and especially in animation, especially in animation, TV animation aimed at children. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, I have 2 small kids, and I'm subjected to many TV shows that they're just wall-to-wall music, and it doesn't really mean anything. But I mean, especially with Monsters, it was a very conscious decision when spotting episodes if at any point I felt the episode was over-spotted, I would jump in and say, guys, I really don't think we need anything here. Because, a lot of the time you're working with storyboards or animation that's not lit or something that looks a bit rubbish. So the temptation is to fill it with music and fill it with stuff so, you can get it by whoever needs to sign off on it or whatever it is. So it's more about kind of figuring out where we don't need it. Having said that, there's a lot of music in Monsters. But then with something like Rabbids, it's very specific, because Will, the director, is a massive needle drop guy, and before the Rabbit movies, he hated score. So those scores, and they're probably maximum. The second one had about 40 minutes of score in it. The first one only had like maybe 25 minutes, half an hour. So it was good. Working with Will was good because he's a big believer of that too. If we don't need music, don't put it in there. And then he's more like, should we go to a song, and then should we go to a score to fill it? And I think on the second movie he flipped that. But so I don't even know if I'm answering the question. But the main thing is like, if you just take the temp out or whatever they've put in to kind of fill it with music, and if it's working, great. Let's not put music in there. I'm not one of those guys like, I want to get as much music in there as possible. I just, for the good of the show, I think it's better if we can kind of just be in when we need to be, and therefore it means more, and we're bringing the stories and the story arcs to life.
Also, Dom wants to spend time with his kids, so it's like
most of the time,
music to write.
Yeah,
More time.
most of the time. Yeah, they're 3 and 6, so it's they put me through it. So sometimes like, no, we'll put more music. We'll put more music in this episode, so I don't have to go back and do bedtime.
No, lovely to work on something that your kids can watch, though. It's
really nice, because I've worked on a lot of, like, when I did Man in the High Castle, and I'm working on a movie right now, which I can't say anything about, but they just cannot watch. So it's nice to do stuff that they can watch, and they get excited, and they tell their friends, and
that's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's sweet to see them get all excited about it.
Yeah, I don't.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I was just gonna say, I don't have any kids, but I have my first animated series. That's the same thing. We're talking about wall-to-wall paper, blah blah blah. And I have 12 nieces and nephews, and it's the first project that I know that they can all watch. So it's exciting when you get to share that with the people in your life that you spend so much time with, and they have no clue what our job is about. We try to tell them. So I understand. Sorry, Natalie.
Oh no, it's fine. It's just a shame because pre-pandemic, I don't know if you managed to do like recordings and your kids could watch as well. It's kind of nice to be able to take them in to see live recordings, but obviously it's a bit of a different experience, because I don't know if you've all had to do like recordings on Zoom and stuff, like over, or Source Connect. but I just really miss being in the same space as the orchestra, being in the control room, and I've found that really, like, I've missed it this last year and a half.
Yeah, we're just getting back to that now. Now we're just starting to get, I mean, we did it a little bit in the fall, but before that it was like individual people recording in their bedrooms, all sending stuff in.
That's it's so frustrating. And now everyone's trying to do their best, but you kind of like send out your music and you get these audio files back and you haven't had a chance to go, oh, can we do it a bit like this? Or maybe try not to do it, so whatever it is. And you're like, all right, I guess I'll make it work.
Except that, yeah.
I'm trying to do the same thing, but I have to wrangle actors for their on-camera performances and like zoom in from afar to like tell them, you know, how to sing, how to play an instrument. And like, it's so hard when you're not in the room with them and like make them feel comfortable. And I know you guys know, but yeah, I can't wait until we can get back in the room together, because that's the fun part. That's why we do all this, you know, like all the other bullshit of like managing personalities and studios and blah 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 blah. I think ultimately the fun part is when we can be artists. I mean, and you guys are much more artists than I am, but just like being in the room with people. I come from a painting background, so I have an artist mentality, but you know, getting in the room with people and making something and creating something is just so special. And that's why I think ultimately that's all why we do this. So
well, you guys are all amazing. You without the music, I don't know how you to better tell the story, and you guys tell the story your own way in such an amazing way. And with that, that's a wrap. It's a wrap, and I'm so grateful to be here with you, amazing people. I adore you guys. So thanks so much to Comic-Con and Jana and Alex at Rhapsody PR for organizing this fantastic event. And thank you to all of you watching this at home. Be good, be safe, be kind, and au revoir.